Assalamu alaikum everyone, and a Juma Mubarak to all of our attendees today. Whether you're watching us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or joining us on our Zoom platform, where our members are able to earn CPD through this session, we welcome you to the third panel discussion of Global Ethics Day Conversation Series. ACCA loves doing these every year because ethics is something that's very, very close to our heart, and we really value ethics as a key part of being an accountant and your entire accountancy journey. My name is Aksa Sakti. I am the marketing executive and marketing campaign executive for ACCA Global. And before we begin on our session number 3, I would like to quickly recap our 2 sessions that took place yesterday. And just to give you an overview, the topics were rethinking regulatory governance with an ESG lens and enabling Pakistan digital transformation and ethics. Both of these conversations are available on our Facebook page and CFA's YouTube page. So please do, whenever you have time, please do go through those as well if you haven't already. They were very insightful, and we had a host of experts from all sorts of fields joining us on those sessions, and those conversations are not to be missed. Before we begin, I would also like to thank our partners for this event: CFA Society Pakistan, Pakistan Business Council, Center of Excellence in Responsible Business, Habib Bank Limited, Institute of Cost and Management Accountants Pakistan, Lahore University of Management Sciences, Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance, Pakistan Stock Exchange, Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, and Sustainability Development Policy Institute. Thank you so much, because हमारे supporting partners के बगैर we're unable to have such impactful conversations. So thank you so much for all of your support. Now, coming to the third session, which is today, which is what we're about to start with. Our topic for today's panel discussion is ethics and EdTech, supercharging careers in accountancy. It's a very insightful conversation that we wanted to have, and it's because ACCA is working on increasing value in education and how we impart education and how we can modernize education for our students, for our members, for our future members. That's something that is really close to us. Before we begin, and before I introduce our panelists and I hand them over to you, hand them over to Alina, who's with us and who will be taking over the panel discussion, I would like to quickly play a short video message from Pulkit Abrol. He has sent in his thoughts over a video message on the same topic. He's the Director Asia Pacific at ACCA, and let's hear from him now.
Thank you very much for supporting our Global Ethics Day event today, which is all about the power of EdTech, education technology, in extending opportunity and giving more people a chance to pursue a satisfying, rewarding, and useful career. It is my pleasure and honor to join you and to say a few words about what this critical issue means for finance professionals, for our organizations, and for ACCA. The EdTech sector has ballooned in potential over the last few years in Pakistan. We've seen the birth of numerous startups in Pakistan, which have fueled their growth with seed funding. It is an important vehicle for investment and growth in the economy, and a vote of confidence in the skills and expertise of the workforce and businesses of tomorrow. EdTech has enormous potential to support Pakistan's youth to develop. After all, 64% of the population are minors. By promoting wider literacy and future-ready skills, it contributes to inclusive and sustainable socio-economic growth by meeting UN Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG number 4, advancing high-quality education. ACCA and its learning partners are eager to promote greater use of EdTech because it's the best possible way of realizing our aim of expanding inclusive and fair professional accounting education to all people, regardless of class or gender, opening up lifelong learning opportunities and supercharging careers in accountancy. The COVID-19 crisis made us all rethink our career aspirations, our goals, and our futures. It transformed the world of work, shaking how we run businesses. The findings from our report, EdTech, Supercharging Careers in Accountancy, chime with our experiences as we drive wider access to education globally. That drive includes sector-leading initiatives such as the growth of our virtual offering, ACCA X, offering free ACCA courses online through our partnership with edX. The research also mentions the existence of barriers to the use of EdTech in the future, in particular the digital divide and different levels of access to reliable high-speed internet, power, and quiet learning places. The aim of ACCA and our learning partners is to tear down these barriers and to close those gaps in access so all people have an equal chance of tapping into the power and potential of online education. Context matters in any attempt to derive value from technology. In other words, it's not so much the technology itself that is critical as the how and where you will use it, or who has access to it. This also applies and is very true for EdTech. It can have a critical role to play throughout the learning process. It offers easiest way of accessing education at every level: learning activities, practice, revision, tutoring, group learning, lectures, all the way through to assessments and exams. And in each of these contexts, a different tool may be appropriate. For example, students who need a lot of direction and guidance, such as novice learners, may benefit from direct, explicit teaching, what we might term as traditional classroom-style teaching, to establish base content knowledge. This can be delivered on any number of video conferencing tools such as Zoom or Google Meet. For other more advanced students, more sophisticated technology-enabled practice such as accounting software or practice tax simulations might be what is required. Ultimately, though, the point is that in this huge EdTech arena, there is something for everyone. Everyone can benefit at whatever level they might find themselves in the educational process. I have one final message which broadens the theme of EdTech to reflect the fact that this event is a part of ACCA Pakistan's Global Ethics Day activities. It is this: ACCA is deeply dedicated to offering the widest possible, richest, and best respected finance and business education in the world. This is why we insist on the absolute integrity of our qualification and certifications. You know that we lead and we led the world in offering remote access to exams during COVID, using digital innovation to keep the route to a finance career open even while exam centers and colleges were closed. As we were expanding education to more people who would otherwise have been excluded from it, we protected and promoted the status of our qualification. We must remember that while EdTech makes it easier to open up, the chance of an accountancy education to ever more number of people of ambition and talent, it doesn't make it easier to qualify. It is still tough, and it always will be. We make no apology for that. And for that very particular reason, it is precisely what makes those 4 letters, ACCA, so sought after, and that is why they're coveted and admired by employers everywhere. It is therefore no doubt that we can state proudly that ACCA is your leading partner in professional accountancy education, and together we will make sure that we keep it there and it remains so. Thank you so very much for listening to me, and have a great day.
We would like to thank Pulkit for his video message and for coming in today. I think it's very, very important, as he mentioned, for ACCA that we work without borders, we work globally, and we work from a global lens, and that ensures having inclusion and inclusive EdTech solutions for us. So that's a very, very important part of our entire journey. Thank you so much to Pulkit again. Before we begin, we have another keynote speaker with us who is present today, and thank you so much, Narayanan, for taking out the time to be present with us today. He is the head of business insights, and he is a regular at our global ethics day conversations. Over to you, Narayanan.
Thank you so much, Aksa. Can you hear me? Hopefully you can. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for those comments, Aksa. And it's really great to be here again, and it's a real pleasure to be interacting with all of you as part of this really important discussion, and actually perennially important discussion. It's not just about last year or this year or the next year. This is one of those foundational discussions around the role of ethics and the role of the accountancy profession in driving ethical practice in society, and as part of that in organizations, large and small, throughout the sectors within the economy. As was mentioned earlier, I'd like to share a few initial thoughts in respect of EdTech. And Pulkit very helpfully outlined some of the broad brush messages where we're coming from at this. And I'd just like to build a little bit upon that in these initial 10 minutes or so, just to set a bit of a scene of where we are, and of course, hopefully provide a suitable link into what I'm sure will be a fascinating panel discussion to follow. So I will set my comments very much in the context of the global report that we did. So pretty much a bit of a global perspective of what we're learning from some of the findings that we sought in that piece of work, and also to contextualize it to considerations such as public interest, such as access to education, equity, and so forth, as was mentioned a little bit earlier. So that is really, some of the overlap areas to the ethics and public interest agenda. So what I'm going to try and do now, and hopefully this will work, is to share my screen. And again, Aksa, if I can just request, so you can see that. Okay, yeah. Fantastic. And what I will also try to do is see if I can make that, put that into full screen.
Perfect. Yeah.
Brilliant. So really what I wanted to do was cover three things there. Just tell you a little bit about this report so you sort of understand where we're coming from, some of the key messages, headline, and just close out straight after that so you can carry on the discussion further in the panel. So in terms of the report itself, few things to really highlight. Firstly, the report is co-branded with edX. Many of you might be familiar with edX. They provide massive open online courses. They're a joint venture. Essentially, they started out as a joint venture between Harvard and MIT, and then they set out lots of courses, most of which are free at the point of use, and then there might be some small charge to pay afterwards for the assessment. But the idea is to drive access to education. They have recently rebranded and moved into a new organization called 2U, but their origins are very much in that zone of providing access as widely as possible. And that was the reason we wanted to partner with them. Is also the fact that we felt that one of the big things facing the accountancy profession is around attracting, making sure that we attract the right caliber and quantity and quality of talent for the future. And platforms like edX ensure, because they are seen broadly by learners both within accountancy and beyond accountancy. They have courses on everything, as you would probably know, from accountancy and finance all the way to engineering, technology, fashion, baking, whatever. So it ensures that our messages and our way of thinking and our ACCA core values are represented as broadly as possible to ensure we bring in the right talent for the future as well. So it's audiences within accountancy and indeed those considering it. In terms of what the report is informed by, it's in a sense a mix of quantitative and qualitative. So we had a survey which consisted of about 1,400 odd individuals across learners and educators, probably in a roughly 2-to-1 ratio there. And we had a few qualitative interviews from around the world, including our own ACC Education Global Forum, which consists of educators, but also a range of individuals across the world, including, as you will note, in Pakistan there. And also worth saying that this piece of work follows on from a previous piece of work we did not very long ago, a couple of months ago, on the area of learning and development entitled Developing the Skills of the Sustainable Business and Finance Professional, authored by my colleague Sharon Machado, who is also with us today, and I'm sure will share further views in the panel discussion. So in that report, we talked about a broad framework, and you'll see within that areas around digital and data. And the report started talking about some of those factors and how they affect the education agenda. And this report really builds on some of that very much from the specific perspective of education and technology, that intersection. So in terms of key messages, I just wanted to highlight in the time we have a few headline takeaways. One is that we wanted to get a sense of what is the current reality when we think about people's engagement with technology in the context of education. And we picked out three very simple parameters. One was, do you use technology to present, watch, or listen to course content? Do you use it to complete learning activities or exercises for development, which may not be very formally assessed, but they're part of your learning process? Or do you in fact use it to complete qualifying assessments, which are a bit more formal and which have a clear certification associated with it? What is the nature of your interaction with technology across these parameters? And as you can see from the chart there, globally, what you're looking at is somewhere between half and 2/3 of respondents who are engaged along these parameters. And what it therefore means is, by corollary, that roughly between 1/3 and half of respondents are not engaged across these parameters. And I think when we think about EdTech and we think about the use of technology, we need to be inclusive in our approach and to recognize that we have a range of constituencies, we have a range of people. There are those who are absolutely on it, and there are those who are somewhere on the journey. And we need to be creating, certainly from an ACCA perspective, solutions and messages and creating the case for this whole space in a way that is relatable and usable by all of these people all around the world, wherever they are in that journey. Also, when you think about devices, there's a range of devices that people use, and they're often portable, as you might expect. Laptops, whether you're looking at assessments or for learning, laptops are naturally a very natural starting point. Mobiles, smartphones are, of course, also heavily used, as are in some cases tablets as well. So I think in general, as you would perhaps not be surprised to see, it's used more for learning and a bit less for assessments. I guess most people, whether or not they eventually end up using it for an assessment, might dip into it for a bit of learning. So there is a huge variation, of course, in the range of devices, but there's also a variation in by region in terms of what sort of devices get used. So if you take the use of mobiles for learning as an example, you'll see that there's quite a bit of variation in different parts of the world in how much people use it. If you look on the left-hand side, and of course we are in the South Asian region today, but whether it's that or Africa, you're looking at roughly 80% of people who cite using mobiles, for learning as part of their journey. But that number drops off quite significantly when you look on the right of the screen, for example, when you're looking at Western Europe, where it's just over half. And for a global organization like ACCA, these are, of course, relevant considerations when we think about how content is structured and how that learning content is delivered to stakeholders across the world. And it needs to be usable and it needs to work for them in the way that they access that content and on the devices that they access that content. So these are all considerations that are, of course, really, really important. It's also worth saying, when you look at what are the different sorts of things that people do in terms of EdTech, what really stood out for me was actually 91%. So more than 9 in 10 are using ebooks or digital books, which is actually a relatively long form source of content. So we're talking here, it's worth saying, about accountancy stakeholders in this survey. And I guess that speaks to a degree to the nature of what you need to learn in your accountancy learning journey. And ebooks or digital books are, of course, more convenient to use than paper textbooks. And they have easier to navigate, clickable links to move from one part of the content to the other, etc. But it's still relatively long form content, and there is definitely a space for that within this whole technology-based learning. So I think there is a space for, really short, sharp videos and for people to be able to absorb content very quickly on the go. But it's perhaps worth noting that there is a space for, deep learning as well, and really getting involved in content that is perhaps needed in order to become sufficiently skilled and proficient in areas of expertise, for example, like accountancy that you're looking to build. It's also worth saying that when you think about using technology in education, it's not necessarily a binary choice. Either you're sitting in the classroom or in a physical environment, or you're, in a completely online environment. I think for a lot of parameters that we tested, the one that really stood out was the blended option. And there's one example there around content delivery by a teacher. So it's really around being able to get the best of both in a way that works for people's individual circumstances. So I think really thinking about it from that lens of blended learning was something that came through very strongly, and is also something that will probably be relevant for those on the other side of the fence when they are educating, and as educators thinking about what is the best way to deliver and create and deliver content. Another thing which I would highlight here is around age groups. So um, my own bias when I went into this was, I thought, well, younger people are going to be absolutely all over it, and then people who are perhaps a little bit further up the age curve might be a bit less comfortable or interested in engaging with technology-based education and learning. But actually, when you look at the data, what you find, and we've got a segmentation across age groups there from left to right. And we've got a few different parameters, whether it's delivery of content by a teacher, whether it's individual or group learning activities, or indeed it's assessments. And what you find across each of those, if you look at the red bar from left to right, or the blue one from left to right, or the gray one from left to right, what you find is that they're roughly similar. It's not a huge change where you have a very large number on the left and then it just drops off completely. That's not really the case. So what we're saying in effect is that EdTech is relatable and relevant across age groups. And I think it's something that is worth bearing in mind, that there's something in it across, and this matters in a world of continuous learning. We're in a world where careers aren't in a place where you can learn everything you need to learn by the time you're 25 and then you rely on that for the rest of time. We're not in that world. We're in a world where there's continuous learning, lifelong learning. And I think that's very much reflected in these findings. And it's not that surprising, because I mean, if you're in your, late 40s, early 50s, you've been using the internet has been around for 20 plus years now. So I think we're seeing the effects of that filter through in what we're seeing in some of this data. And related to that point, and some of the early observations around blended learning, one of the things we were testing is, what is the value proposition? Where do you see, some of the biggest areas where EdTech really adds value to your life? And I think the big one was around flexibility in terms of access to education, that at a time that suits me, access to experts. I might be in a town or in an environment where the people who have that knowledge are not easily accessible to me. The college that offers that kind of training is not accessible to me, and technology-based learning makes it much more accessible to everyone. And this speaks to something that Pulkit mentioned in his earlier comments around Sustainable Development Goals and SDG 4, which is around ensuring inclusive, equitable, quality education. And I think there's a huge ethical public interest dimension to that, to the conversation that we're having and which will follow. So in conclusion, I'd like to leave you with three headline thoughts, particularly around EdTech from the lens of considerations for learners. Firstly, around flexibility of EdTech to fit around your life commitments. It doesn't matter where you are in your life, what's going on in your life, what commitments you have. I think when you think about blended learning, when you think about flexibility being highlighted as one of the really key things that it brings to the table, there's a very clear point there around taking advantage of that aspect, thinking about blended learning as not a binary choice between in-person and online. And I think underpinning all of that, the ethics and public interest agenda around inclusivity and being relevant, for example, across the ages. There are broader discussions around ethics, for example, around malpractice and those sort of things. And I'm sure some of that will come through perhaps in the panel discussion. But I think the overall big picture around EdTech, which I'd really like to leave you with, is a sense of opportunity. It's something that can really add positively to what the education agenda is, what the access to education agenda is, and what the inclusive delivery and consumption of education is all about. So hopefully that sets the scene for you. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much for that. And I think that was very, very insightful for everyone attending today. As always, conversations from you are Narayanan. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you.
I will now hand over to Alina. Alina is I would call her a lifelong friend of ACCA. She is the principal of SCAN School of Accountancy, and she will be moderating today's panel discussion. Joining her is Dr. Arshad Ahmed, Vice Chancellor of LUMS. We have Umar Zahir Mir, Chairman MNP ACCA Pakistan. We have Sharon Machado, Head of Sustainable Business at ACCA, and Shehzad Ahmed Malik, who's the President of ICMAP. Over to you, Alina.
Thank you so much, Aksa. Indeed, it is a pleasure to be here and to moderate this session on behalf of ACCA. I would like to thank Pulkit and Narayanan for a very apt setting of scene and setting the stage and making the conversation easier for us. Today, we have a team of panel of experts, and just like Narayanan mentioned, there has been a study in which ACCA has focused on how EdTech is going to supercharge the future of accountants. And considering that it is the Global Ethics Day today, we'll be mixing the concept of ethics and EdTech together and how both of these can be used for a brilliant tomorrow. Some of the very major key takeaways that I think Narayanan has mentioned is that through this study, we already know that EdTech is actually relevant and relatable to all the ages, and flexibility is a very major factor for them. And so today we will also be touching upon multiple points like the capabilities that the accountants need to build when they want to contribute to a better world, the implications and opportunities for the educators as well as employers, because EdTech, both ends are going to be covered, the delivery end and the people who are going to benefit from it. The different dimensions of a good learning and development, the latest EdTech methods, we're going to talk about inclusion of AI-enabled assessments, adaptive learning pathways, simulations, gamification, your virtual realities, etc. And there are going to be some top tips also that how not just the students, but just like we saw that people and accountants specifically at every age can take the maximum benefit out of it. So I will start off with the introduction of our panel. I'll be introducing them one by one, and then I'll be putting up questions. Meanwhile, from the audience also, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat box and we'll take the Q&A at the end. So the first speaker over here, a very well-known figure, just like Aksa said, I think he has also been a very long friend of ACCA, so needs no introduction, but still I will be giving a brief introduction. So the first one over here is Mr. Umar Zahir Mir. He is a representative of the firm MLCC, which is a highly regarded tax practitioner firm in Pakistan. Umar Saab himself is a very well-respected tax practitioner, and he's also a finance and taxation trainer for public sector employees in Punjab. He's the chairman of the member network panel of ACCA Pakistan, a member of ACCA's International Assembly, and also sits on a number of ACCA committees and forums, including the ACCA Global Tax Forum. So welcome, Umar Saab, to the session.
Thank you, Alina.
Then next, the panelist that we have is Ms. Sharon Machado. She's the head of sustainable business with ACCA's policy and insights team, which generates future-looking throughout thought leadership, research, and influence policy relating to the technical domains of sustainable finance, ethics, governance, risk, corporate reporting, tax, business law, audit and assurance for driving better business through professional accountants. Her roles in the past with ACCA have also included and have helped in shaping the ACCA qualification and its digital transformation. So welcome, Sharon.
Really pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise. The third esteemed panelist that we have is Mr. Shehzad Ahmed Malik. He is the president of ICMA. He is the CEO of Shehzad Malik Management Consultants and a board member at different companies. He also holds honorary positions in committees of Rawalpindi Chamber of Commerce and Industry. With over 24 years of professional experience, Mr. Malik has worked at strategic level positions at Islamabad Electric Supply Company and Army Welfare Trust. Welcome to the session, sir.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not the least, we have Dr. Ashar Ahmed. He is a PhD in educational psychology from McGill University and is the Vice Chancellor of the Lahore University of Management Sciences. He was a Professor of Finance at Concordia University for over 20 years. In 2014, he was appointed Vice Provost of Teaching and Learning and Director of the McPherson Institute at McMaster University. He also held positions of Chair of Teaching and Learning Canada, President of the Society for Teaching and Learning in Higher Education, and Vice President of the International Consortium of Education Developers. In 1992, he was awarded the 3M National Teaching Fellowship, one of the Canada's most prestigious award in educational leadership. And I think his journey has not stopped because he has been named International Educator of the Year 2022 by the Academy of International Business. So a pleasure to have you in this session, sir.
Delighted. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, sir. So we'll start off the discussion with a very senior ACCA member, because someone who has interacted with the students and the ACCA stakeholders at all levels, from industry to from the student level to the students who have recently qualified, and to the membership level. So I'll put up my first question to Mr. Umar Zahiri, that what do you think are EdTech-based solutions and technologies? Are these more used by younger people, or are they being used by more experienced professionals? And do you think that they are going to engage more for the upcoming generation?
Thank you, Alina. First of all, fantastic moderating so far. And just another thing, Alina is also a colleague from the MNP. She herself sits on the MNP too now. I would like to begin by congratulating ACCA of continuing its tradition of holding these ethics events, in fact, series of ethics events globally across all the major markets. And it's good to see the topic that's been chosen. Now, coming on to your question, there are actually three questions, Elena. So EdTech, I believe, as we all appreciate, is the utilization of technology and technology-based solutions to help in the education sector to ensure that we can have higher quality lifelong learning for as many people as possible, while also utilizing these technologies to train the trainers, the teachers, the instructors, etc. And now the second question, I think that's been very well answered by Narayan's presentation. I mean, there is this commonly held perception that younger people are more tech savvy and more novice. I'm sure we all have kids in our houses and in our family who are so apt on mobile devices and internet and all, and we are amazed by the level of their technology savviness, that there is this very strong perception that younger people are more comfortable with technology. So when I have been honored to have seen Narayan's presentation before. So the first time I saw the presentation by him, that was like a revelation for me, because as he has shared, there's quite a good sample size and it has quite a wide diversified reach. So it's not based on any particular sector or a particular country. So the find was quite interesting that although there is a higher use in the younger generation, but there aren't that many differences like we would expect. Maybe the bar suddenly going down the drain when you move ahead in the age sector. I guess perhaps one of the most important reasons for that has been COVID. While COVID pandemic has been a global challenge and brought with it several miseries, constraints, it has also brought with it some opportunities, especially for the technology adoption. So the pace of the technology adoption increased manifold. People realize not only the importance, but also the benefits. And even in societies and countries where there were cultural issues, where people used to prefer person-to-person contact, because of the constraints of the COVID pandemic, they also had to shift as much as possible to technology-based solutions. So this also resulted in professionals, especially people in the higher age bracket, needing to be more used to the technological platforms in order to serve in their role and effectively perform their duties. Perhaps that is one of the reasons why we get the survey results that we got from ACC's research as shared by Mr. Narayan. So I think that basically answers the question that there is a wide held perception that younger people naturally are more tech savvy, they are more used to it, they are more adaptable to these changes, especially when we are talking about Generation Z, and we talk about how the different generations have different attitudes towards work. Having said that, I believe one other aspect which is very important for us to consider is that the speed of the technological change and the need for workers' skill set to keep pace is dizzying. I mean, we all know that the fourth industrial revolution is simply changing how all the sectors operates, how workers learn new skills, and how the traditional sectors that used to operate in a different manner before are becoming more and more technologically advanced. In fact, if I remember correctly, I read in a report somewhere on the World Bank's database that 65% of today's kids, when they grow up, they'll be working in the roles that haven't been invented yet. So the kind of skill sets, the kind of technological grasp we need is not only unique in this time period, but it also underlying the importance of lifelong learning. That is also something that was highlighted in ACC's research and very ably explained by Narayan as well. So I guess that answers your two questions. And if I remember correctly, the last part was, how do you think they will engage with the upcoming generation?
Upcoming generation, yes.
Yeah. So I think in terms of technology, I believe the adoption and the acceptance that has happened due to COVID period and the realization across the board and across the continents of the importance of technology solutions in order to spread the skill sets and knowledge as much as possible has made it more likely that the future generations and the existing generations, their engagement, the change management, the changeover would be more seamless than many thought beforehand. One more important aspect here would be the technology adoption that has happened would depend on few important factors. So one would be the technological infrastructure. We have discussed this in ACC's various forums as well. You mentioned right now I sit on the ACC's Global Tech Forum and International Assembly. So this is something we have highlighted, ACCA being the top finance body globally and really leading the agenda in terms of EdTech, should really be leading this as well, that the kind of solutions you develop should be such that they work equally good in low infrastructure countries. Let me try to clarify with an example. So if we are talking about developed nation, we are talking about North America, Europe, etc. It's not a problem. You get good infrastructure there, good internet speed, etc., etc. Access to technology is easy. But now when we are talking about developing nations, we are talking about some nations struggling in Africa or some of the Asian nations, etc. The infrastructure there is not at par as per the standard I've just quoted, North America, etc. So that is one thing that needs to be addressed to ensure that not only the transition is seamless, the change constant, and the interaction of the future and current generation as seamless as we desire. That would be one aspect. Another important point, I believe, would be to ensure that we take into account the various cultural factors. Because remember, we are humans at the end of the day. We are not machines. We are not robots. We create these technologies to achieve efficiency, to achieve ease, to address the challenges we are facing. So for example, if I talk about Pakistan, I'm sure all the friends here from this part of the world, and same is the case, by the way, with India, Bangladesh, other countries in the region, many of the businesses here adopted technology during COVID. But as soon as the COVID restrictions were over, there was a lot of going back to the in-person meetings, etc. There's that cultural aspect. People want that to happen. Now, that is not same as in the North American region or in Europe. Many of the big corporate that invested in the infrastructure there, they are very comfortable with work from home, meeting taking place online, etc., etc. So I believe these are some of the challenges that would need to be addressed going forward. Having said that, I've no doubt that with all the collective efforts and with institutions like ACCA, CFA, and all the other top bodies putting in their weight and the consistent research and efforts we are seeing, we should be able to achieve the desired outcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Versa, for a very detailed answer. Just a small follow-up question, because you have international exposure also. How would you compare, you've made the comparison of the students, but if we specifically talk about only the business professionals, how do you compare the market of South Asia, like Pakistan and our neighboring countries, to, let's suppose, UK and US, etc.?
Thank you, Alina. That's also a very interesting question, and it covers a very important aspect. So I believe there are there are several dimensions. I'll, in the interest of time, just quickly try to address two things. So one is the kind of businesses. For example, now we have countries where there is an aging population and a requirement of skilled resource. And we have countries like Pakistan or India where there is a youth bulge, an educated younger population that is very primarily placed to carry out various back office operations, businesses, etc. Now, there are two aspects to it. Number one, the technology has made it easier, especially for the developing nations, to outsource the work more, even the work they might not have outsourced before. And these countries are primarily placed. So perhaps this is one of the best times in the history of humanity to collaborate across the regions, across countries, and actually address this skill gap. So the nations that have the population bulge, the skill set, can actually export those without having to move the people like before, without actually having to have the migrations, which bring with it the other challenges and socio-political issues. But the other important aspect is that I've already mentioned about the technological infrastructure and the mechanics, the softwares, the systems, the procedures used. They have to be at par, just like we now have global accounting standard, auditing standard. So I foresee that in future, we should have and would have similar mechanism to have a globally accepted mechanics. Obviously, there are different circumstances, so at least hopefully this will happen. If not, then at least in various parts of the world there would be similarly accepted standard. In terms of the current state of the business, I believe that the cultural aspect, the efficiency, the technology adoption is more in the developed nations for obvious reasons. And certainly there is a growing focus and realization on its importance in our part of the world. So I see similar collaborations that we have discussed about in future to actually address this gap, the developing nation getting more resources flowing their way by actually exporting the skill set in way of the youth bulge that they have. Thank you.
So I think once again, coming back to the point that it's a way you look at it, whether you treat it like a challenge or you treat it like an opportunity. So it is creating an opportunity also. Thank you so much, Amarsa, for a very detailed and insightful response. I would like to ask Dr. Arshad my next question. Since you also are very much involved in the direct delivery of the education part. So do you think that EdTech will give our future professionals the rounded skills that they actually need to succeed and be successful? And what are the risks and any kinds of gaps and threats in this regard?
Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I'm very pleased to be here, delighted with the esteemed company of panelists and experts and the wonderful talk from our keynote. Thank you. Just before I answer that, one of the things that crossed my mind in your previous question was a focus on young people. And I think, the love affair with technology is not new. It has been there now for over a couple of decades. And as our younger demographic has shown that, any kind of extreme or embracing of any new technology also has its side effects. And we should be mindful of those, especially for the young, where we find increasingly people who are not getting 6 hours or 7 hours of good sleep because of these devices. There is a lot of isolation that is also created as a result of these devices, just as there are mental health issues that are creeping up now, and they are very mindful of it. I would go as far as also to raise concerns that the young are telling us about in terms of the sustainability footprint or the carbon footprint that technologies bring with them. So while they have been fantastic, developments and so many opportunities, so many doors have been opened as a result of these technologies, we just have to look at platform companies. They are the ones that are now dominating the business landscape, and many people want to work in those kinds of companies. But at the same time, we should be also thinking about the side effects, especially for the young, when we consider embracing, adopting, and diffusing these technologies. But that was just some of the thoughts that were, as Umar Saab was laying out a very nice open framework for how to deal with these questions. Those were some concerns. We see them at our university campus, for example, and we need to be mindful of that. Your question about future profession, will EdTech give our future professionals the rounded skills? I don't think EdTech is going to give us anything other than tools that we may choose to use if we so wish. EdTech doesn't give us skills. We need to decide what the skills that we wish to imbue in not just the workforce, but in society at large. That is our choice. So EdTech, it just gives us more opportunities to make those choices. And, I have to go back because I want to tell you just a little bit so I don't sound like a tech phobe or someone who is averse to technology. In fact, on the contrary, I have been an early adopter. My own PhD was on modeling an online course. This is back in the 90s when internet was just coming on, that validated a model through cognitive science and other instructional technologies. But the reason I mentioned that to you is that having authored a course, you talked about edX. There's also Coursera, which is a sister company or another company that is a large provider of online courses. And I have to tell you that about 8 years ago, when I authored a specialization at Coursera on it's called Finance for Everyone, and this is not a plug for my course, but just to let you know that I've had over 100,000 people take that course. Now, I've been teaching for 40 years. I have not taught 100,000 people, but in a much shorter span of time, the impact and reach of whatever I can offer through those courses in Coursera has had a qualitative impact on hopefully people who've learned something from them. So, having been someone who has embraced technology from the get-go, I have to say that even when I go back, say, in the mid-2000s, okay, if you looked at the headlines then, the brave new world of digitization had arrived. And it was, in fact, I remember a study where the PricewaterhouseCoopers, Deloitte, and KPMG pointed out that the internet and digitization have touched most aspects of business life. And this is back in 2005 or 6. And they were asking why corporate reporting has been left behind and what are we going to do about it? And they asked two really excellent questions back 15 years ago. What if investors and analysts could tick a few preference boxes on a piece of software, and every week, perhaps even every day, they would get a customized feed of data about what's going on inside the company. So that was, wow, we can now, perhaps we should be doing this because we can see inside many other businesses. Why can't we do that with companies? And then they had a second great idea, which was to put a greater focus on non-financial measures in corporate reporting, right? Not just plain vanilla profits, sales, cash flows, that kind of stuff, but also customer satisfaction, employee turnover, and product innovation. I mean, those are things we want to know about as well for any company. And that was then. Now, fast forward. Let's fast forward and learn some lessons. So today, you have incredible breakthroughs in machine learning, in artificial intelligence and big data, in pattern recognition, and so on and so forth. And companies that are specializing now in software are using AI to forensically interrogate data. They're coming up with services that are competing with the big four, right? So whether it's on insurance or whether it's legal matters and increasingly accounting, you have services that are being provided that are being done by machines, which raises very interesting questions for educators who are thinking about, well, what kinds of skills will human beings bring in this equation where deals and transactions are becoming more and more borderless. So when you start trying to fit machine learning into existing roles, where employers and customers have become used to a strong sense of intuition or flexibility of human staff, when those collide with machines and processes that become mechanized, you do run into all kinds of sometimes inertia, sometimes avoidance, and sometimes fear that this is going to displace us, or this is going to create all kinds of disruptions that will be very difficult to overcome in the business models that exist. Now, I'll want to tell you something very personal and specific in my own experience as a professor of finance. And I remember back in the early 80s when I started teaching in my undergraduate and MBA courses at McGill, I used to do something of an experiment. I'd start my first class by putting up 3 posters. And each of the posters had 1 or 2 words on it. One poster would say profit. Another poster located in another part of the room would say shareholder wealth maximization. And the third one would say well-being. That's all. And I'd ask students to just stand up and say, if you were to make financial decisions, accounting decisions, what would guide you in terms of your decision making? Like, what would motivate you the most? Is it profit? Is it share prices? Or is it improving societal well-being? And you know what? In the 80s, and I would say even in the 90s, more or less, it was dominated by folks who would go to profit, or who had read the chapter in the book. They would go, oh yeah, we have to maximize shareholder price. So they would go there. But increasingly over the years, as we see more and more realization of SDGs, of climate change, of sustainability, and there is a new understanding. ESG is become so predominant now in our curricula, whether it is environment, whether it has to do with social stuff or governance issues. You increasingly find same questions, same posters. Most people go to well-being now. Now, these are MBAs or executive MBAs, or these are the future leaders. And they're telling us that, hey, what really matters to us now in thinking about our roles as leaders and thinking about decisions that are going to govern us have remarkably shifted towards a much more nuanced understanding of the role of a business. And it's not just the bottom line. And that is important, of course. No one is discounting that. But at the same time, we cannot just let someone else deal with the side effects of what business brings to the fore. So I think these are the kinds of questions that we have to keep raising to our students as we talk about the challenges, which are always hidden opportunities. I always find that framework to work very well for us, that there's no shortages of challenges in countries like Pakistan or in other emerging countries where we have, grand challenges. We have wicked problems of poverty and inequity, or we have issues related to energy or water, for example. And these are big issues in the sense that they affect large communities and groups of people. And to solve these, it's not going to be one discipline, whether it's accounting or finance or science, or pick your discipline that you like. You cannot look through one lens to solve big problems. And so the idea is for educationists to think about integrating curricula and to not think in silos as have developed in the West. So I don't find Western models to be particularly suitable for the context that we heard from our previous speakers, but rather create our own version of what we believe to be interdisciplinary work or multidisciplinary work, what people are calling transdisciplinary work, where we get experts together to solve problems. And accounting has a huge role to play in that. And in that role, digitization is going to obviously be one of the big factors that will keep these conversations very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a very detailed and I would say, a very holistic answer, touching upon, I think, all the problems, an end-to-end solution. So yes, absolutely. And I would request Sharon if she can shed some light on the same thing regarding the skills of the future business leaders with respect to the study that you have conducted and the learnings that you have gained from them.
Yes, definitely. And actually, before I start, I have to say I could listen to you, Dr. Ahmed, all day long. And some of the comments that I make will resonate with and be complementary to some of the ones that you've made. I'd like to maybe supplement the answer that we've already heard by thinking about, well, the characteristics of the Generation Z, you know, who are fundamentally in our future professionals, or our professionals indeed today. The world of tech, some of the comments that we've already heard, and then maybe what EdTech solutions could then be to support that, and then maybe finish off on a few of the risks to bear in mind. And when we think about, you know, the young professionals of today, they are digital natives, but when we think about the type of digital native they are, they're people who perhaps collaborate. They do collaborate, but they collaborate in more of a remote way. Certainly, my research has found. And so therefore, they're perhaps, you know, less engaged than in a face-to-face, real-time way that actually is needed for business. And when we then think about the skills that they then need, you know, perhaps aspects of real business communication, you know, that professional skepticism to pick up on some of the threats that exist in a digital world are perhaps missing. And I think there's a fantastic opportunity, dare I say, for some of us older, you know, generations who, and I'm not, you know, I am technologically challenged, I would say, in some respects, you know, to learn, but also impart different skills. Also, something that we just heard about, you know, what's important to people has really changed. So our research around the Generation Zs, yes, getting a job is incredibly important to them, but they're also more mindful of well-being, social equality, and the environment. They also don't expect just one career. So therefore, when you think about the skills they're going to need, they're going to be broad skills. And then reflecting on some of the responses to question one, they have had, you know, for some, 2+ years of education that arguably has been disrupted, especially where the enforced COVID solutions, technology solutions, perhaps weren't, you know, necessarily the best in class. Moving on to this technology-driven world, you know, we know that data is everywhere. Its value is vast and subject to you know, massive fluctuation. We're also seeing that regulation is catching up, but not fast enough. So therefore, when we think about the skills that are needed, arguably, we're really looking for heightened ethical skills, and we're looking for heightened professional skepticism to make up for the fact that, you know, regulation is potentially a bit slower and just catching up. And there are many technology solutions. So therefore, I'm guessing that we need to prepare people to almost be system agnostic and have those transferable skills. Now, as part of my research, I think EdTech solutions certainly are a enabler. And I think that's what I was hearing from the earlier answer. So when we're thinking about oral communication and collaboration skills, there's a place for constructive education. And what I mean by that is education where the learner drives their own learning. They're immersed in learning with each other. So EdTech can create fantastic peer learning communities, for instance, that connect people, not just in their region, but outside of the region, so that they can appreciate cultural difference. They can perhaps be exposed to other industries. And that makes me touch on something around self-awareness, which constructive education is about, as I've just mentioned. And that's something that the IESBA code talk about quite heavily in terms of the need for a growth mindset. In other words, to drive continual learning. And when we think about skepticism that's needed, I think experiential learning is really, really important. And I know that Narayanan's report and indeed mine talk about the role of simulations and gamification, where you can expose learners to, the complex scenarios that might be new, and also the types of things that we want our professionals to be able to deal with in business, but we really hope that they never ever have to face in their careers and do it for real. So I think there's a massive role for gamification there. Also, in terms of work experience, I think you can use EdTech solutions to open up learners to many more different employers, both in their community, but actually further away. And so therefore they're building those wider skills and that awareness of the wider world beyond where they live. Picking up on risks and gaps, I think EdTech has to be quite careful to make sure that it's developing the appropriate collaboration skills. So they have to be built into any solution. There also has to be a need to move away from on-demand or purely on-demand learning, which can be unmotivational and personalless. In terms of technology, something we've heard, if the real world for tech is moving on really quickly, then EdTech solutions are likely to move on quite quickly too. And so therefore just being mindful of lost investment, whether it's financial or indeed in people, because I think tutors are incredibly important in any technology solution. And then just being really mindful of poor design and the potential for bias. Machine learning and AI, effectively learn from us. And so therefore us as humans, we are biased. And so therefore we need to be really, really careful that we're not introducing bias in terms of feedback for learning or solutions for learning themselves. And of course, I think something that Pulkit touched upon is around technology challenge, whether it's through infrastructure or indeed actually skills, because we as users of it have to be comfortable too. So I'll just stop there and pass on for any reflections. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I think being a tutor who does teach actually online, some of your points truly resonate with me. And I think keeping the balance of experiential learning over time, if I look back how I was teaching 5 years ago, the landscape has completely changed. So I think upskilling ourselves also as tutors and then making sure that we have the right kind of combination and very right, we have proper regulations. Ethics is something that cannot be compromised. So thank you so much for a very, very detailed answer. I will put my next question to Mr. Shehzad. Because you also belong to the, you're currently heading ICMA, so very much interaction with students is there. So how do you think that Shehzad, EdTech is going to change the education and career journeys of the future generations?
Thank you, Elena. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me and giving me opportunity to dialogue and to learn and contribute on this Global Ethics Day. And first of all, I will share of the last World Congress Accountants 4 years back, almost before COVID. And at that time, they were discussing in the Congress that the future IT and especially the audit will be completely move on IT facilities with the help of AI and other, facilities. And we were surprised that how the complete audit can be moved. And we discussed there. And with the passage of time and during COVID, there are so many changes due to this with the help of IT and even ICMA Pakistan. We have with the help of our IT team, and we have with the help of IT team and the country conduct the exam not only in Pakistan during COVID, but all over. And that is after that we are continuously conducting our exam and coaching and all over the part of the world, and which reduce the time and expense of the student. So this is a very open fact, the future of education due to this rapid advancement of technology, and is the very much necessary in the career journey of young generation. And EdTech is the one of the most widely educational technology tool. And we hope that EdTech can bring revolutionary changes in the education regime for our future generation. Especially, one of the best benefit of EdTech is its ability to emphasize differentiated instructions. Students having different, paces and thoughts can be benefited by using this approach, by using digital models and simulations, enhanced communication, advanced research, and online collaboration, AI, and other different, all the learning material is available all over. The online learning environment can help them, even to the shy kids, join in the discussion. They can be, with the help of visual learners, can maximize interactive software. And interactive visual content from tech can help them, and all the not only students, but also even educators. Online video is available, most powerful form of EdTech, as the medium feature multiple advantages there. And it allows teachers and students to brush up of their skills anytime. While students tape sessions back in the 90s, video became a more powerful tool now. Similarly, due to this, EdTech improves sharing learning material while creating a safer teaching environment for students. It allows teachers to provide better group feedback, which areas need better focus, and similarly, better efficiency down the line. EdTech maximize collaboration, which can even bring students from other part of the world. And this is the main, is the most powerful advantage, that any part of the world you can share your thoughts and you can get the benefit of this EdTech. It can allow cross-cultural exchanges and even have kids who cannot go to educational institution to work remotely with their peers. One of the biggest problem which I feel education, and everyone knows, is the large divided part, of the haves and have-nots that persists today. The gap between educational institutions and poor communities can stunt the growth and development of many. With growing EdTech, educational institutions can now use online resources and extend their services to those who would otherwise not have access to it. That is the part where we have to, and even educational institutions and all other think over this, and how we can, provide them the access. Instead of relying on physical infrastructure, e-platforms can be successful from anywhere. This means more opportunities for undeserved and remote areas. And at the same time, it allows children to learn more about various non-academic topics. These include gender identity, feminism, race, and more. EdTech provides conferencing and technology, allow for more resources sharing. This allows remote students to get the most out of their settings. They can access online courses and collaborate with each other. So at the end, I would say it's a very successful tool and for our upcoming generation. And without it, we cannot move. And if you want to, save your time and expense, ultimately this EdTech will help you. And your presentation way and your speed of work, especially nowadays, pace is the biggest challenge, and how you can complete your assignments, if even in the education level and even in the jobs. Whoever work smartly and use of this IT technology and EdTech, they will get their targets in a very shortest time and in a more smarter way. With this, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, I think the shift to remote examination was a very big step, which
Yes.
I think had been planned by most of the qualifications, but the change, the time period within which that change had to take place was a classic example of that when you have no other option, you have to switch to technology. So, thank you so much.
Sorry, especially at that time during COVID, students were very, afraid of about their time will be wasted. Exactly. And our examination system is, initially it was biannually, then we shifted it into quarters, and now it's bi-monthly exam we are taking. And only with the help of this technology we can complete our conducting our exam. And they are sitting far-flung areas like GB, Gilgit, Baltistan, and other Balochistan areas. We are, conducting these exams. And then with the advancement, we also using in our branches is all over in UAE, Saudi, Canada, and Australia, etc. Then we move this technology and pattern and conducting exam from even UAE, Saudi. Our students are taking the advantage of this system.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Absolutely. And I think the organizations which had already taken this step to a certain extent, for them, the journey actually became very easier. Thank you so much. We are almost running out of time, so I'll be putting one last question to every panelist, and I would request you to combine your closing remarks with that. Sharon, if I can start with you, that considering that it is the event for the Global Ethics Day, so what role do you think ethics play in the use of technology for digital learning solutions?
Okay, yes, thank you. And in the interest of time, I will be quite quick. So let's think about the 5 ethical code principles. When we think about confidentiality, for instance, so number 1, EdTech is always learning. The data is always there, which Alina, like you, I was a tutor in the past, and I would probably forget, aspects of that. But if the data is always there, then what requirement will there be for education establishments to share that data with employers many years on? We all learn from our mistakes. So what happens to the data attached to the mistakes that learners are making? When we think about professional behaviour, digital solutions can often, track our emotions. So what does that mean then for the tutor and the learner if they're having an off day, in the virtual classroom or other ways? And how does that get fed back? When we think about objectivity, the human tutor, the course designer, which is probably what we're going to see more of, needs to be so much more alert, just as we all do in the digital world. So what we need to be quite mindful of in our solutions and our working with EdTech is not just simply to trust the technology black box. We need to be demonstrating skepticism, risk, that critical thinking. Integrity, I think, another key, doing the right thing, really, really important. So, don't always think that EdTech is the solution on its own. It learns from us, and we are biased and flawed, so it will be too. And that's really important with an integrated thinking approach that we must be demonstrating. And then competence, which we've all touched upon. You know, we need to be competent with technology, both in the real world and in the education sector. So we need to have a growth mindset, and we need to be applying that critical thinking, which would probably be my two last sort of major kind of leaving points for educators and indeed learners themselves. And I'll stop there in the interest of time.
Thank you so much. We have a couple of very interesting audience questions also. So I'll quickly take them before we wrap up this session. So I will request Mr. Umar to please answer this one. One of the questions is that many EdTech startups have been launched in Pakistan in the past couple of years. However, we are way behind countries within our region. What initiatives are being taken by the Pakistan education sector to further promote this sector?
Okay, well, I guess this question is best placed to perhaps all the honors in the EdTech sector. Anyway, EdTech sector, especially education sector as a whole, has been very close to my heart, and not many people know that, but I'll share that as a passion, not as a career. I've been part-time visiting associate professor at UET, at Barrier University, etc. That's something I do to go give back. So I think there are a few things. There are fundamentals like the EdTech means you need to have better assessment of the requirement. Like Mr. Shahzad was saying, we have specific user requirements in Pakistan, and Dr. Arshad very rightly said that one size doesn't fit all. We can't just have a product or a variant from abroad and say that will work here. We need to actually assess our requirement and create solutions according to that. That's the first thing. Second thing, obviously, we would have to make the necessary investment, and education is a profitable sector in Pakistan. So all the important players in the market need to realize that this is the future, and as part of their corporate social responsibility, but also in the interest of their businesses, they should make the necessary investments there. I believe in Pakistan, like for all the other sectors, for education, since public sector is the largest player, so government funding and initiatives would be extremely important for the ecosystem, and also help the private businesses to focus more on these aspects. There are so many things we can say, but I'll just take the lead from Sharon. And in the interest of time, I guess we have covered 3 important aspects. Over to you, Ali.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll put up the next question to Dr. Arshad. I think you can build up a little on the conversation that we had with Sharon and Musa. And we have one more question. This says that EdTech might lead to fast evaluation of education delivery system. So in a longer run, they're basically talking about that. Do you think that EdTech is going to replace the physical delivery system? Is that ever going to happen? And if that is imminent, then what is the solution to it?
The short answer is not in my lifetime.
Okay, very to the point.
And I will do everything I can to make sure that we have the best of both and not consider it as a mutually exclusive question. But the question you raised about ethics, I think, is a profound one. And as Sharon was mentioning, you know, the fundamental principles that outline ethical obligations, whether they are integrity, objectivity, and confidentiality, etc., are really, we've made a lot of, we've gained a lot of ground in a better understanding of how they implicate the types of decisions and dilemmas that we face. But the honest answer, if you want me to be a bit more pragmatic, is that I think we need to step up really in teaching ethics in accounting. Given the reason I say that is because there's so many global, high-profile financial scandals that keep coming our way, you know, and we seem to be grappling with them still. So I'll give you a couple of examples. If you've been reading up on the British outsourcer Carillon, that's a story on its own. Or fraud of the German payments group Wirecard has made headlines for God knows how long. Corruption scandal at the Brazilian oil company Petrobras, another one. Greenwashing, I mean, this is the latest with all the sustainability efforts. You have misstatement of environmental credentials across the board, many cases. And this is despite all of their accounts being signed off by, you know, one of the big 4. So it's not that they are not capable of doing this, but there are gaps. And ethics, I think, is partly an explanation of how we treat it as an add-on rather than something really core to what we do in an educational curriculum. And it can be a curriculum in any of the disciplines, social sciences, humanities, whether it is science and engineering or law, business, of course, and the list goes on. So I think if we stop thinking of it as an afterthought, but more in the programming of what we do in designing our curricula, we might be making a few steps ahead and integrate these ethical considerations into courses so they see the trade-offs. There are economic trade-offs, there are moral reasoning trade-offs, there are trade-offs related to our own understanding of what you might call quantitative reasoning. So we bring evidence to the fore and then we make decisions, but the decisions are always giving up something else that we chose not to do. And being mindful of them results in more voices coming into the fore to have some sort of a consensus that emerges that this is the kind of norm we want to live with. And these norms are really ones I think we should think about for our future generations than simply those that create all kinds of agency issues for self-promotion or self-realization and what have you, where the theme I'm hearing from my colleagues is that it's one of collaboration. It's one where no one person or discipline has the expertise to solve these big problems. We have to work together and there's no other way to go forward. My last closing comment for you would be a bit cautionary about embracing technology in a way where it's all plus plus, because there are many minuses and we've had a lot of experience now. And I think the point raised earlier in the opening remarks and then echoed by our speakers was about thinking that, quality and SDG 4, which speaks to quality of education, is something we have to underline, maybe even capital letters, that just by bringing online courses or just by having instructors who are used to teach in the class face-to-face and now are in front of a screen is not the answer to go forward in terms of quality. In fact, students categorically reject talking heads in an online format, and they would rather turn the screens off and do something else, which is far more important to them. So I think we have to be very careful in making qualitative decisions about how we can improve the student experience, keeping in mind these other factors. So I'll close with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I really feel proud sitting over here on this forum because I think ACCA is actually one of the most forward-thinking bodies which has incorporated all of these things in the education stream also to the maximum extent possible. Like when we talk about the ethics part, we have the ethics and professional skills module, which all students have to pass. I teach SBR, so I know for a fact that at every stage in the strategic business reporting, now the students need to evaluate. And the interesting part is that the initial exams always focused more on the ethics side with respect to reporting. And now more frequently, we are seeing in the exams also ethical issues related to technology faced by the accountants. So we are preparing our students, and I hope together we can add that kind of value for better business professionals for the future. So the last thing over here, Shehzad Saab, any closing remarks from your side? And then I'll hand it over to Aksa.
Thank you very much. It's a very, learning session, and dialogues and the other contribution and the words of Umar Zaid Saab, Dr. Saab, and our learned speakers, and Narayan Saab and Ms. Sharon, and given on the topic, very valuable, and it's helped all the audience and our students and how to use this EdTech, and also the contribution of all this day, Global Ethics Day, and everybody has given his, sharing his thoughts is very valuable for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And with this, that we have the We hope to add further value for the future to our students by teaching them correctly. ACCA now has, like I said, ethical portion in all strategic professionals. We have it in our practical experience requirements. We have remote practical experience supervisors. So we are giving our best support, and we have a fingers crossed for a better future. So thank you so much.
Can I just have 1 minute before you pass it on to Aksa? So I think regarding the question on ethics, it's been very well answered already by Dr. Saab and Sharon. I just wanted to try to put an impetus that we as a society also need to focus. So for example, look, what is ethics in technologies? If we'll be very simple, these are moral principles, how the technology should be used, and the key aspect like accountability, digital rights, privacy, freedom, data protection, behavior. So just a case example in point, and then I'll be closing it. So we have a database, another database in Pakistan. Nobody have ever, at least in the mainstream, risen the question how the data is being handled, the protection, privacy, your mind, everyone's family tree is out there, etc. All the most intimate details. And I remember the entire decade I was in UK, despite some serious security concern, the only reason a similar database was not enacted in UK was the question around these very ethical challenges. If there's such a database, how would this be handled? So the point I'm making is the cultural aspect. In addition to the fantastic efforts ACCA, LUMS, ICMA, and all the institutions, CFA are making, we all in our personal capacity would also need to highlight these challenges in the society as a whole, so that in the words of Dr. Arshad and Shahzad Saab, collectively we can move forward. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think a wonderful closing remark for our session, and beautifully, you can say, summarize the whole conversation. So thank you to all the audience who has joined us. And now I'll hand it over to Aksa for her closing comments.
Thank you so much, Alina. And I think lost for words because everything you all have covered. Thank you so much for all of your time. And I would, on behalf of all of our attendees today, because we have quite a significant participation from our members who I hope are happy to earn their CPT hours from this. I would again like to thank all of you for joining in today. Before we end today's session, I would also like to remind our members that we have another session, and future members who are watching on our socials, we have another session at 6 p.m. Pakistan time. We will be covering ethics and inflation, a very important subject and a very important conversation at this point in time as well. So please do stay tuned for that. I do believe the registrations are still open for that. So if you haven't registered, or any of your colleagues or friends haven't registered, please do let them know as well. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.